you very much. I'm very happy to be here and to have part in this panel discussion with Fred Allen and Gail Ford Smith and Coach Val here, so good to be with y'all. I am not getting my signal up for the remote here. Want me to check the network? I'm on the orange network. We are looking. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about a historian's perspective on looking for creative, self-starting, and what we might call entrepreneurial church leaders. Silver and gold have I none, but such as I have give I thee. And what I have to offer is the perspective of a historian. I'm basically going to tell you about two, if you will not mind me calling them kick-ass Methodist Episcopal Church itinerant ministers of the early 19th century. That's a technical theological term there. As soon as we have some images up on the screen, I'm going to be able to move forward with this. So see what's up here. Y'all use that term in your Board of Ordained Ministry, don't you? There we are. Okay. We've at least got an image on the screen. I still do not have a signal for my controller here, so what are we going to do? Okay, I'll call out next slide. Okay, identifying, encouraging creative, self-starting, entrepreneurial clergy candidates. I want to begin by showing you some statistics you may have seen before about the membership of the Methodist Episcopal Church and then the combined Methodist Episcopal and Methodist Episcopal Church South in the 1900s. We estimate, these figures are from the Encyclopedia of World Methodism, that the membership of the ME Church in 1800 was 65,000. By 1825, the membership of that denomination was 341,000. Doesn't take a lot of math to figure out that that is an almost 4 times growth in church membership in a period of 25 years. You see the same thing in the next 25-year period. By 1850, after the division of these two churches had combined, and I'm only counting ME and ME South at this point, their combined membership was 1.4 million, again, a nearly 4 times growth in that 25-year period. In the next 25-year period, you see growth has slowed down to about double or a little less, 2.2 million by 1875, and similarly by 1900, 4.1 million. The question we might ask then is, what accounts for this absolutely remarkable growth, especially in the early part of the 1800s? What I want to suggest to you then is that it was not only itinerant ministers following the American frontier as it developed in that period. That's part of the answer that was suggested by the famous Methodist historian at the University of Chicago, William Warren Sweet, who later taught at Garrett and then at Southern Methodist University. That was his great thesis. I would add the cooperation of local Methodist stewards who were very often instrumental in founding local societies and then calling conferences to send preachers to them. If we could have the next screen then, I want to tell you a little bit about one of our itinerants in the southwestern United States. His name was William Stevenson. I don't have an image for him, so you get a sunset from the southwest. If you could move to the next screen, I'll tell you a little bit about his career. He was born in 1768 in the town of 96, South Carolina. I talked to a South Carolina delegate this morning that's still in the conference and in, I think, the Greenville district. In 1792, the year after John Wesley was born, he set out for the Tennessee country. He settled in Greene County, what is now the Holston area, in that year. At that point, a county of North Carolina, but which became part of the state of Tennessee 4 years later in 1796. In 1797, he had married a woman named Campbell from Virginia. probably one of my relatives from the Shenandoah Valley. In 1797, he went up and stayed with her family. While there, he went to Kentucky in 1798, put in a year of crops and raised them, and while there had a dramatic conversion experience that he describes. In 1800, he moved his entire family to the area of the Cumberland River in Tennessee, just north and east of present-day Nashville. He had a not-so-dramatic experience of entire sanctification, followed by his desire to become a class leader and a local preacher. If we could move to the next slide. Between 1809 and 1810, he moved to Missouri. You'll realize how early after the Louisiana Purchase and the exploration of Missouri this was for him to move his family there. He was a witness to the horrific 1811 New Madrid earthquake that shook that entire part of the world. In 1813, his brother invited him to go down to the Arkansas Territory, and without any invitation from a district committee on local church location, he preached in the Arkansas Territory and began organizing Methodist societies there. In 1815, he was admitted on trial in the Missouri Annual Conference and was ordained deacon, I believe, by Bishop Asbury, but I think Bishop McKendry was present there, one of the last times that Asbury would perform ordinations. In that year, he returned to Arkansas, and he notes that in 1815, he crossed the Red River at a point near Texarkana and preached at a colony of Euro-American and African-American settlers there called Pecan Point. So next year we will celebrate the 200th anniversary of Methodist preaching in Texas, and we will republish his autobiography at that time. In 1817, he was ordained an elder and admitted to full connection in the Missouri Conference. In 1820, living in in Arkansas Territory, he was a representative to the Arkansas Territorial Assembly, and he made the motion to select Little Rock as the capital of the state. In the same year, he was made the presiding, not the eider, but the elder of the Hot Springs District in the Missouri Annual Conference. He received funding from the Missionary Society of the M.E. Church. In 1826, he shifted his allegiance to the Mississippi Annual Conference and became presiding elder of the Louisiana District when he settled in Louisiana with his large family. His son, James Stevenson, was an illegal alien in East Texas who crossed the river into Mexican Texas in 1833 and established the longest continuous Protestant congregation in Texas, what is misspelled with two letters A, but should be spelled with a letter A and a letter O, McMahon's Chapel. In 1841, he wrote his autobiography. It was published, if we could change the next slide, in the next year in the New Orleans Christian Advocate. He illustrates folk Methodism on the frontier. He believed in frequent supernatural events, including healings. He describes vigorous religious experience, including the jerks and screaming and falling down unconscious. He founded numerous societies or congregations in Missouri, Arkansas, and Louisiana, as well as one in Texas. He died on March the 5th, 1854 in Louisiana, and 4 years later his autobiography was published in the New Orleans Christian Advocate. Now I want to tell you about a very different Methodist Episcopal Church itinerant preacher. Her name was Zilpha Elaw. She was an unauthorized itinerant preacher on the East Coast. We have an image associated with her, but it is suspiciously similar to images of Sojourner Truth. In fact, I think they're using the same images interchangeably between the two. Sojourner Truth had preached about 4 or 5 years before Zilpha Elaw began preaching. If we could move to the next slide. She was born at some point after 1790 in Pennsylvania into a free black family. She was brought up in Philadelphia. She describes being raised by a Quaker family after the death of her mother in 1802. In 1808, she joined a society of the Methodist Episcopal Church. A few years later, after having rather undramatic experiences of conviction and conversion, she had a dramatic experience of entire sanctification, and sort of typical of that age, felt called to preach immediately after that experience. In 1823, she opened a school in that area for African American children. In 1825, she began to engage in missions among enslaved people in Maryland and Virginia and other slaveholding states. She began preaching without authorization long before women were authorized to preach in the Methodist Episcopal Church. You may know it was not until 1873 that Anna Howard Shaw was granted a license to preach in the M.E. Church, despite John Wesley's own support for women being recognized as preachers. Between 1827 and 40, she preached in the United States, including many trips to Maryland and Virginia, where she faced the great risk of being captured and sold into slavery herself. But at great risk to herself and her family, she carried out this unauthorized preaching mission. In 1840, she moved to England and lived there and preached there for 5 years. In 1846, she really self-published in London her autobiography entitled Memoirs of the Life, Religious Experience, and Ministerial Travels and Labors of Mrs. Zilpha Elaw, an American female of color, together with some accounts of the great religious revivals in America. I love titles of books in that age. They give you the whole cliff notes in the title. She returned to the United States after 1846, and her subsequent life is undocumented. We don't even know when she died and where she was buried. She was willing to admit that her earlier religious experiences were not as dramatic as other Methodists described. Her conversion was more or less a gradual experience, and she had some boldness actually in saying that, because she didn't conform to the pattern that was expected for telling her story at that time. If we could ask then, what is it that William Stevenson and Zilpha Elaw and probably lots of other of these itinerants in this period of absolutely remarkable growth, what did they have in common? I would identify at least these points. They were both highly motivated, self-starting, very creative, and I think Bishop Grant Hagia's term entrepreneurial is a very good term to describe both of these people. They're out there starting their own ministries, self-publishing, writing to support their ministries and so forth, and they do this very much on their own. Secondly, they had no formal education. William Stevenson was not living in any place where there were institutions of higher education. He actually taught music and lower grades, but both of them give evidence of deep study. I've written a paper on William Stevenson's Echoes of John Wesley, and they give evidence of very, very strong writing skills that they had developed on their own, communication skills. They both describe vivid religious experiences and miracles, as Methodists tended to do in that period. They had itchy feet. These are people who really wanted to travel. You know, if somebody in Bug Tussle decides to leave there and go to Garrett Evangelical or Duke or Candler, or where's that in Dallas, Perkins School of Theology, it might be a good sign that these are folks who want to move, they want to get on, they want to see the world. And that's the way these folks and other itinerants really were. They acted without authorization from church authorities. William Stevenson undertook this trip to Arkansas at the invitation of his brother, and so far as I know, without any consultation with his presiding elder or the bishop in that area. My question then is very straightforward. Would your Board of Ordained Ministry approve William Stevenson, Zilpha Elaw, or contemporary people with similar profiles to them? You want to say yes right now because I've depicted them as kind of Methodist heroes, but really, do they meet the profile? If our psychological testing in particular looks for stability as a desirable quality in clergy, I kind of doubt these folks are going to make it on that kind of test. So a second question I might ask: how might your board encourage and identify candidates with traits similar to those of William Stevenson and Zilpha Elov? What are you going to do to find those kind of self-starting, creative, entrepreneurial people and encourage their gifts for ministry? And finally, final question that's very much like the question that we raised last night in our discussion in the South Central Jurisdiction group. How might our processes need to change to enable us to find and encourage candidates for ministries with these kinds of leadership traits? I'm going to leave you with those questions for your meditation and thoughts and look forward to our conversation.